we finally got into our closing keynote speaker, which is Mara Powell. Mara Powell is the university archivist at the University of Detroit Mercy, where she oversees the preservation, organization, and accessibility of the university's historical records. In addition, Powell manages UDM's Black Abolitionist Archive, a historical research center devoted to the study of African Americans involved in the transatlantic struggle against slavery. She holds a Master of Library and Information Science and a Bachelor of Arts with a concentration in film studies from the Great Wayne State University. Before joining Detroit Mercy, Powell held archival and digital asset management roles at institutions including Allied Vaughan, Carhartt, the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit, and the Detroit People's Platform. Her work has included metadata development, digital preservation, and the implementation of archival systems that enhance long-term access to collections. Uh-oh. My computer is being weird, so sorry about that. Here we go. Powell has a strong interest in storytelling and in media and brings a creative lens to her archival practice. And so without further ado, bringing us to a close, here is Mara Powell.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Just setting up my presentations. Give me 1 second. Can you see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
Here we go. So thank you so much for having me this afternoon. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Amber. As you mentioned, my name's Mara Powell. I actually just recently stepped into my position as university archivist at the University of Detroit Mercy. And it's in a very, very exciting time for us because not only am I the first full-time archivist that they've ever had, but we are celebrating our 150th anniversary coming up in 2027. So it has been quite a crash course for me to kind of get settled in and be able to make materials ready for all the folks who are planning some pretty amazing celebrations that we're going to have going throughout the entire year, starting with the 2027 school year. I'm sorry, that'll be fall 2026 coming up. Wow, okay, getting ahead of myself. So today I wanted to share with you how this work that I've been doing in settling in here at UDM and B, throwing, full force into the 150th anniversary celebrations. I just want to talk about how this work has led me to think a lot more critically about access, absence, and what it means to center social justice in archival practice. So allow me, if you will, to start with a short anecdote to give you a sense of what this has looked like for me in practice. Just a couple of months ago, when I was just starting to settle into my position here, I got a remote research request from a researcher who is doing a presentation on the origins of our Center for Black Studies back when we were University of Detroit. I think it started in the early 1970s. I had a tight deadline, so I quickly searched what I could find to be able to send to this researcher. And I found a neatly labeled box, Center for Black Studies, with these few neatly labeled folders. I dutifully scanned out some of the things that she was looking for, sent it to her. She was really happy. She was happy that we had honestly anything at all about this. So I kind of wiped my hands with it, and I was like, great, another happy customer. But then fast forward now to a few weeks ago actually. I found, as I was doing a preliminary inventory for the rest of our holdings, in the middle of a filing cabinet throughout all these other assorted topics, Center for Black Studies folder. Big fat folder. A lot of information in there that was not included in that first labeled box. And what was found here was pretty juicy because we found indications that there was pushback from administrators, resistance from the community, and a struggle to start this program. And I thought if I had stopped within the first few folders I found, the narrative would look really different. And it's moments like this that make me realize firsthand archival work can be about shaping what we can be known, what can be found, and ultimately the types of stories that get told. And that moment kind of changed how I think about my archival work, especially here, but as a whole. I realized quickly that this is not an isolated issue. And like I mentioned earlier, UDM has never had a dedicated full-time archivist. We've had folks who have worked here part-time. We've had librarians who are full-time who take time out of their day to come and do archival work, but nothing on a full-time basis. So I knew there was going to be a backlog when I started this position. When I really dug in, though, that's when I realized there was more work than needed to be done than I originally anticipated. And I find that's to be kind of a recurring theme in archival work. So I'm sure if the archivists out there could probably relate to that. But what I found was that these are all these materials that have reflected growth without consistent oversight. And then we've also moved archives several times, and every time it moves, a little bit gets shifted, a little bit gets shifted next time, a little bit gets shifted the next time. And so now we have things just scattered across collections throughout many boxes in our space. And yeah, if you've worked in archives before, this might sound familiar to you. To make things a little more difficult for me here, there isn't yet a comprehensive finding aid, so it's very challenging to find things at times. And we aren't alone at UDM. Many archives operate under resource restraints, and very similarly, and we can't control this as archivists. And sadly, when the materials aren't organized, described, or accessible, the stories they contain can effectively disappear. Without a finding aid, it can be difficult to confirm whether relevant materials are even in our collections or not. And for the researcher, it's like these materials just don't exist. They cannot be part of the narrative or the story that they're researching. And I think that raises a larger question. What does it mean for something to be accessible? You don't have to answer aloud, but I would like you to think about that for a second and how you define access in your own work. We can make things physically accessible. But what about intellectual, linguistic, emotional, and cultural accessibility? In many cases, the next barrier can appear through the language used within the materials themselves. Oops. And as I started working more closely with students and researchers, I began to notice a pattern in not just the way that we organize materials, but in how that students and researchers experience them. So both I and the students I work with regularly encounter outdated language. For example, one of the proudest collections UDM has is our Black Abolitionist Archive. And for those of you who don't know, Amber explained a little bit about this, but what it is a research collection with over 800 speeches by Black abolitionists from the antebellum period, alongside approximately 1,000 editorials that document the discourse of that era. And one of the first things students notice and comment on are terms that were regularly used in the 19th century and are repeatedly seen in documents from this era, are very shocking and uncomfortable to see today. Many students, when they see materials in the archive, will stop and mention out loud, I can't believe it says that. And I've heard this phrase, literally, this actual phrase multiple times. And maybe some of you have too. And though it's historically accurate, it's just not, it's not something that they've seen and they're used to seeing at all. And this isn't just related to 19th century materials. When you move forward into newspapers and publications published in the 20th century, even as recent as the 90s, you're going to see terminology and headlines that at the time were considered acceptable. Today, they're harsh, reductive, and can be offensive. So this isn't just one collection or time period. Materials collected in archives preserve language as it was used across decades and context. However, language is always shifting and accumulating meaning. What these experiences make me think about is, what is our responsibility when we present materials that reflect language and attitudes of their time? On one hand, I don't want to alienate users with harmful language. On the other, I want to preserve historical context. How do we handle these types of situations? How do we prepare users, especially students who are encountering these materials for the first time, to engage with it critically and not be alienated or pushed away? This is something I'm still figuring out. I'd be interested to hear some ideas a little later about this. I don't think there's, one answer for this, so it's a great discussion. So moving on, I've been talking about what is present in archives, in the archive, and how language shapes that experience. But there are also moments when language wasn't the issue. In fact, it was a lack of documentation altogether. In preparation for our university's 150th anniversary, I've gotten many questions about the history of our institution and how it's related to its surrounding community over the years. One question I've gotten from a few students is that they wanted to know what was going on our campus during the 1967 unrest here in Detroit. That's a really good question. I myself didn't know since I was new, so I thought this is going to be a little research job for me. And my first shot at looking for something, I couldn't find anything. I was very disappointed, and I thought that can't be, and that can't be. Did a little more digging, and I found one photo. And this is the photo I found, and it's the National Guard looking over the campus. So as you can imagine, the student and I who were questioning this had quite a few questions about finding this. We asked what wasn't collected, what wasn't preserved, what wasn't considered part of the institutional record. So the one thing that I could kind of come up with was that, because I think the student wanted to know, what were students' opinions, what were students who were living on campus experiencing, things like that. So the one thing I could think of was, well, our student newspaper didn't come out during the summer, so of course we're not going to find anything there. But when all I have to offer a researcher is this one photo, the absence of any other perspective is telling quite a specific story. So experiences like this beg the question, how do we intentionally practice social justice in our work as archivists? The first thing to understand is that this is slow work. Like I mentioned earlier, many archives have resource restraints. And at UDM, I'm a solo archivist, so my day-to-day work is constantly shifting. Again, that's probably something a lot of you can relate to. I remember always hearing, we wear lots of hats, and we do. I'm not only the archivist, processing archivist, I'm reference archivist, I'm field archivist, I do it all. So, but I always make sure that part of my weekly workflow includes revisiting and in some cases, writing new metadata and descriptions in hope of improving access and discoverability. This includes things like reviewing collection titles, folder labels, and metadata to ensure language is inclusive, accurate, and context aware. For example, we're working on updating the description on our Black Abolitionist Archives website from antebellum blacks to Black abolitionists from the antebellum period. When we eventually update our entire website, I will add context notes concerning historical language used. We already do have some of that on our current website because on our folklore archive. So, and that's a good start. That was here before I got here, but we need to do a lot more on that. So this isn't just the discoverability aspect of accessibility, but the way in which people relate and understand collections. So now I want to address anyone who's currently in the field, anyone who's a student or entering the field. I want to encourage you to look for what's missing in the collections you're working with. Let reference requests guide you in that. People will ask questions and, you can, if you're not finding it, there you go. That's actually how some of my most important discoveries have started here, as being a new archivist here and not knowing the history as good as some of the people who are steeped in the history here. People ask questions, and I tend to get a lot of similar questions because I'm up in a position where I think a lot of folks here at the university never knew who to go to if they had these sorts of questions. So I get a lot of trends, I would say, in the questions that I'm asked. Another thing is be honest about your limitations in your collections. It's important to acknowledge what isn't there and help researchers understand why. Kind of, sometimes there is a reason, like with the example of we didn't do a student newspaper during the summer, so we're not going to find a student newspaper article about what was happening in July 1997 or 67. But I'm not trying to make an excuse, but that's a reason why that's not there. Furthermore, accessibility, digitization, it remains a priority. Digitized collections increase access for researchers. We live in this, the Google world where you want to just type it in on your phone and there it is. And we can't really do that with everything. But I think kind of meeting folks where they are and giving them that is very helpful. And that's why it's important to ensure that digitization includes searchable metadata, OCR text, and alt text for images. And when we come across historical terms that today are damaging, we need to explain the context and provide a modern equivalence. For example, when we digitize newspaper articles with problematic language, including a brief phrase like this collection reflects the language and attitudes of its time can help users engage critically, and then we're not erasing the history. Another thing to consider when we're finding absences and gaps in voices in the collections is outreach and community engagement. It's more difficult and sometimes, in some cases, impossible to go back and find materials. So the best thing to do is foster relationships right now. You want to do things like co-create exhibits and do community projects to gather material stories, oral histories, things like that. And if you're at a university, alumni events are a great opportunity. Partnering with alumni association or relations department, it benefits everyone involved. It's important now to make connections with groups, no matter where you are in your community, on campus, or wherever your institution may be, so they understand the responsibility of the archives and feel comfortable donating their materials when the time comes. The goal here is to steward an archival record that reflects a broad range of voices. And this is something that is ongoing, repeated, iterative, again and again. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's a practice in your everyday work and your everyday decisions while you're working that will amplify marginalized voices and foster critical engagement. And I think that's where we all come in as information professionals, and especially as archivists. The archive is shaped by decisions that we make moving forward. The choices we make in what we collect, how we describe it, and what we prioritize are all shaped by values, even though we don't explicitly name them. In your own work with collections, again, pay attention to what's not there and question the neutrality of the collections that you may work with. The absence of records, like what we saw here at UDM with the 1967 unrest, is a reflection of what wasn't documented, what wasn't preserved, and sometimes what wasn't considered important at the time. Next, think carefully about the language you use in description and access points. Language changes over time, and the words that appear in archival materials, and including in our own metadata, can shape how users experience those collections. And it's a very important and worthwhile task to go back and revisit that metadata. It's an archivist's job to help others critically engage critically with potentially problematic and challenging history. It starts with small actions as you notice things, such as improving a finding aid by adding context or making materials more accessible to a broader audience. For example, as I was preparing for this speech, that is when I noticed the outdated language on our website regarding the Black Abolitionist Archive. It took only a couple minutes out of my day to go in and change that language to something more inclusive and more in line with how we use language today. So as you can see, it's not dramatic. It's these small actions that just accumulate. And over time, they're going to shape your collection to be more inclusive and representative archival record. So, to tie it all together and bring it back to my first story about the Center for Black Studies papers. At first glance, I didn't think that there was anything more to that first box about the story. That was it. I found that box. I scanned the items that my researcher requested and I emailed to them, and that was that. But there they were, scattered across the entire collection in a place that I never would have even thought to look to begin with for something like that. And at this point, I'm like, will I find more? Who knows? I might. That's why I'm not completely giving up on the fact that there could be more things on the 1967 unrest. It just could be that it wasn't described properly. It wasn't organized, put with, like items. So it could be in another completely oddly named folder somewhere else, and I'll find it in a few months, next year or whatever. So, back to the Center for Black Studies. that it just revealed a perspective that not even the faculty at the time understood. So it was so just important that I found that. It completely changed the story. So, and in conclusion, archives don't simply preserve history, they determine whose voice is heard. And that is, in a nutshell, how we can center social justice is by making sure that these historically unheard voices are heard. So thank you very much. I would love to hear anyone's ideas and comments about their own work in doing this and some of the solutions that they've come up with helping folks, contextualize some of this like more difficult material and the language in there, and also any questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I know that there were many of us who were very curious to get an inside look into your work, especially with the Black Abolitionist Archive, as well as just UDM intention as well. I want to say too that it's incredibly important that we remember, as you pointed out, that a lot of these actions that can help our communities, that can help elevate these voices, they're quick decisions. It's the difference between someone, like you said, someone looking at something and being like, oh, this is trash, and someone being like, oh, wait, no, this has historical value. It fills a gap in the literature. It's an important perspective to have while doing this work, because I think sometimes we can get bogged down because there's so much. It's
Yeah,
never ending.
it is.
But it is important to remember that what we are doing in our day to day is making an impact. And it's those little decisions. And so with that, we open the floor to questions. I see many compliments have been sent your way. I see Camille has also asked if you know the answer, how much of the University of Detroit Mercy's collection is unprocessed? Do you have an idea? Again,
Wow, not really. So,
hazard.
when I came in, it looked like a lot of it was processed. And then when I actually dug in, I realized that maybe it was at one point, but without there being someone here, a lot of stuff I think wasn't, when people retrieved it, I don't think it was put back properly. So there's a lot of cleanup. Our um, what you call our special collections, those all are processed. I have some backlog on that, but our actual like university collections that are just all, we have the U of D things, and then we have Mercy materials as well before,
Hmm.
and then we combined in 1990. Yeah, that stuff is, I mean, some of it might be kind of processed, but I don't have a finding aid or anything like that. So my work has been pretty much doing a preliminary inventory just to kind of be like, this is what we have, this is where it is. And as I'm by myself, oh my gosh, it's taking forever. So hopefully by the time I get tenure, I'll have that done.
It makes me think of our panel discussion and talking about the importance of, like if in an ideal world, if we could have the financial funding, but also the human resources.
Yes.
In order for this work to get done, we need bodies in the archives. We need bodies out there collecting this. Um, but no, yeah, let's see. Oh. Trying to see if we have any more questions in the chat. Um, but it sounds like a lot of people are interested in your work. It is 1:48, which is a little bit early, so we do have time. So if there was something you wanted to bring up, or you weren't sure of, now is the time.
I'm just looking at some of these comments here. Yeah, I'm I was really shocked that I couldn't really find much about the 1967 unrest either, because like we were right here. We're right here where a lot of the action was. Um, and then Kai says, it makes you wonder if the omission was purposeful, and that's really, a good point. I wondered that too. It does, like I said, it tells a story, and a researcher is going to look at that, and I mean, they're going to make their own opinions about that, and I can't, blame them. And I would love to see if the Detroit Historical Museum has some on that. I know they have some other materials from our school, like from different concerts that we had held here. So I'll have to partner up with them in the near future.
It looks
Check in with me, not now, Kai, but probably next school year when we're starting. We're getting a couple. We're having some admin changeover over here. We're getting a couple of new associate deans that are going to start this summer. So I think the dean wants to wait till they get settled in, and then we're going to try to we want to hire an archives intern and hopefully get some, or not intern, archives tech, and get some interns in here too. So yeah, check back in with me in a few months.
perfect. And we've got a question from Camille. She says, as a solo archivist, do you feel support within the institution? Also, do you connect with other archivists in Detroit?
So I think that they want to support me, but frankly, I don't think they understand at all what an archives is for. And I can see that in some of the things that are back here in the archives that have been collected over the years. I think they might have understood the archives as a place where things go to die, or, a place where we don't know what to do with this, put it there. So like I have a lot of like the posters they had up in the lobby, just resting against the wall. I don't need that. But, so they want to be supportive, but they don't know what to do. Um, they don't really want to, give any money really for me to hire someone. But I think that's campus wide type thing right now with everyone's under budget, restraints. So no one's really getting hired. I guess I can say they want to support me. They really love the idea that I'm here and everyone wants to talk to me. And they want me to do things for them, but they don't know what to do. And even admin here kind of doesn't understand archives that great. So they lean a lot on me. Oh, and then she asked, second part of the question is, do I connect with Detroit area archivists? Sometimes I just joined, well, I guess that's not Detroit because that's Michigan. I'd like to.
I'm trying to think of what is it? I think it's called Metal, the Metro Detroit
Yes.
Archival. I can't remember what the L stands for, but
Yes, I think I remember being in a Facebook group with them.
yes,
Yes.
yes. I was trying to think of like, do we have local archivist organizations um outside of like, like SAA or something,
Right.
something truly local.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. Oh, league. That's what the L is for. It looks like we have another question in the chat. What is your approach for educating your institution about the archives?
I kind of use anytime anyone asks me something, I use that as an opportunity to kind of explain to them what the archives are and what I'm here for. It can get kind of frustrating. Like, for example, planning for the 150th. I'm working with actually I'm working with a lot of different departments on campus about this. But when I was working with the alumni uh, relations, she's, obviously meeting with me because I have these resources, what they want, images for their, marketing and everything. And we're talking about how I'm going to be digitizing these things and the types of things they want. And then she mentions that she has all these items in her office. And I say, well, you should give them to the archives. We'll take care of. Oh, well, yeah, I know. I thought about doing that, but then what? Then they just sit there. I don't under, and I don't understand why I didn't give them to you, because then they would just sit there. And I had to explain to her, no, I'll take care of them. And then you're here right now using materials that someone in your position 50 years ago gave to the archive. And she kind of was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, like I said, I get a lot of attention since I'm the first archivist here. So anytime anyone wants to talk to me, I let them know, because everyone's got their little, here at UDM, it's a very tight-knit community. We're small. A lot of people have worked here for 20 years and went to school here, and their dad went to school here. They met their spouse here. So everyone has this like little bit of connection here and a little bit of history themselves here. So I just use that little bit of like, I guess, I don't know what the word, like I got a little bit of like clout, like culture, like capital cultural or cultural capital that I cash in and try to let them know. And then also too, just making myself kind of known, just in, hey, you guys are having a department meeting. Can I come in and talk to you about what you guys can do for your faculty? For example, like I deal a lot, we have a museum studies course and also history. So partnering up with them and, letting them know this is the types of resources your students can use. These are the types of assignments I can help you with, things like that.
Oh, there's a follow-up question. Have you done anything? Oh, like, hey, y'all need to know this stuff. Let's have a nice little Archives 101 course together.
I haven't had time to like do like something very formal like that, but I really want to. We'll see. After this 150th stuff is kind of been ruling my life, and everything's going to be due July 15th, and my vacation starts July 10th. So, so once I get this, put to bed, I'm going to really get into this. But yeah, I want to. So far, I've had good opportunities with being invited in on 150th like training sessions to kind of instruct people about what I'm doing for them and the types of things they can expect. And after the first training session I got so many people stopping me in the hall and then emailing me later and wanting more information. So I just think anytime that you can just put yourself out there and people know that you're a person and that you're there, they'll want to listen.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. If any of our attendees are feeling brave. Oh, you're just getting compliments. Well, I don't see questions popping up. So, uh, with that, that concludes our third Beyond Barriers conference. Thank you so much, Mara, for your presentation.
Thank you for
Um,
having
it was very enlightening, especially to hear about what's going on at UDM, especially hearing that you're the only archivist, full-time archivist. I wish you well, and I'm excited to see what's in store for UDM's archive in the future. And so with that, that concludes our third Beyond Barriers conference. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you have learned more about centering social justice in the work that we do as LIS professionals and how being informed and inclusive is critical in this work. Please keep a lookout for future inclusive programming from the Inclusive Excellence Committee and the School of Information Sciences. If you have any questions or suggestions for future programming, please send me an email at Amber, or let me give you the right email address, aharrison@wayne.edu. With that, thank you, and I hope the rest of you, all of you, enjoy your day. Hopefully it's not raining where you are. But thank you.